desert, not diving with Scuba.
Just before we get into this week's episode, a word from our sponsor. AC55id.com is the fastest growing electronic music marketplace. Whether you're buying music, selling music, listening to podcasts, this is the place for you. 1 cent per stream is the payback rate for streaming, the mythical 1 cent per stream. It's a reality on AC55ID. They have their own pressing plant, so they can press vinyl for you if you're a label, and they can do those final orders on demand. Yeah, order by order. That's pretty incredible, right? The other great thing about them is they pay back for podcasts. As I mentioned, you can listen to podcasts there, and they pay 1 cent per stream for podcasts too. As a label and an artist selling music over there, you pay 0% commission. So you keep 100% of your sales. There is, however, a monthly fee, but as a viewer of Music Not Diving, you get 6 months free when you sign up. So when you use the code SCUBA6, signing up to AC55ID, the first 6 months are free. That's pretty amazing, right? So head over to AC55ID.com to check them out.
Brought to you by AC55ID.
Welcome to the show. I'm Scuba. This is Music Not Diving. Okay, on the show this week, we're talking lo-fi house, or rather we sort of are talking lo-fi house. Baltra was one of the biggest names in that pretty short-lived scene that blew up, I suppose, between 2016 and 2019, that kind of period. Anyway, I'm kind of searching for it. I remember watching this from afar and finding it really interesting, actually. It was the kind of thing that caught a lot of heat, like people kind of were polarized in their opinions of it. I found it really fascinating from a kind of engineering perspective, like kind of making your tunes intentionally sound bad, basically. That's what lo-fi is, right? It's objectively bad audio, but I just love the aesthetic of it, actually. So it really interested me. I didn't get involved in it at all with the label or anything. Well, I played out a few of the tunes and, you know, I just kind of looked at it, as I said, from afar and found it interesting. Baltra, like I said, was one of the main guys in it. We've had him on the label, actually. He remixed me, but after he left the lo-fi thing. So he remixed a track called Never Forget of mine in a really awesome way, actually, but not a lo-fi house way. In this conversation, however, we are talking about lo-fi house as well as the other stuff. It is, like I said, fascinating. He has an interesting backstory too. He is from Philadelphia originally, spent a lot of time living in New York in the 2000s and 2010s, really immersed himself, by the sound of things, in the music scene in New York City, slightly overlapped with the early dubstep scene there. He attended Dub War, an absolutely legendary night. We've had Dave Q, who ran that night on the previous audio-only incarnation of this show. He was working on Wall Street, actually, at the time, and that is a aspect of his conversation that I was not anticipating. Before I researched this properly, I didn't know he had that kind of finance background. So we get into some meaty stuff like that, which I find absolutely fascinating towards the end of this conversation. So if you're into that kind of stuff, well, yeah, definitely stick around till the end. This is a good one. You're going to enjoy it, right? So before we get into it, a reminder that you can support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/ScubaOfficial. The links are in the show notes. Both tiers there get you bonus content. Yeah, that's pretty good. If you don't want to do that, I completely understand. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about the podcast. Word of mouth is the best marketing. Obviously, I've started saying that. I think it's a good thing to say though, right? I think it's basically an accurate thing to say about marketing. Everyone's obsessed with digital marketing these days, but word of mouth, that's the stuff. Okay. Without further delay, let's head over to the studio and talk to Baltra. Baltra, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Good, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming, man.
Pleasure to finally meet as well.
Right, exactly, yeah, because we've been emailing for a number of years now, actually.
We've been in touch for probably 5 plus years.
We have swapped remixes, like to pretty good effect, actually.
Yeah.
I did a great remix for us.
I can't thank you enough for the one that you did too.
Jeez. Yeah, wow. Sometimes it works. It doesn't always work doing a remix swap, but when it works, it's a thing of beauty.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, okay. So what have you been up to? Where are you living at the moment?
So I've been living in New York for 20 plus years now, but at the moment I'm between New York and Athens.
Athens?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not
bad, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Athens is an interesting place, right? Plenty of history. What took you to Athens?
So my girlfriend and I are there. We were looking for a place not in the States to be for a little bit. Mm-hmm. She's from Budapest, and we we settled on being in Athens. One of her best girlfriends is half Greek, half Hungarian. So she's got some roots there. And
What goes on in Athens music-wise? I played there but ages ago. I mean, there are clubs, aren't there? There's some cool stuff does happen, I think.
I think so. I'm still trying to figure that out as well. I was booked to play this festival there the summer of 2020, so it didn't happen. It's called Pliskin Fest.
Okay.
So I've been kind of in touch with them to see what's going on. Try to figure that out when I get back.
Yeah, fair enough. And New York, 20 years. What is New York like now? How do you sum up the dance, the electronic scene? What's cool happening in New York? What's the state of the scene? What's the health wise status?
Sure. It's quite different. I think there's going to be many different opinions on this. I think from people from New York who have passed through New York. I think you have a lot of great venues right now. You have a lot of competition. It's great for all the up and coming DJs and the, career DJs and whatnot. I think it's fantastic, but as you know, here in London, when you have so many events going on in one night, it can possibly be a bit spread thin.
Right. Okay.
Depending on the events going on, each night.
Yeah, right. I mean, like the kind of story of London is that lots of the smaller venues have gone. And that's the kind of trend that's, I guess, been I mean, well. Basically every major city has experienced something like that, right? Yeah. But New York, I think New York's always had a kind of healthy turnover anyway. Like there's probably less kind of there's been historically been less legacy clubs that stick around for a long time.
Correct. Yeah.
Whereas in London, I suppose we more have our kind of institutions. Right. And so when one of them does go, it feels kind of painful. Right. Yeah. But New York, I mean, positive, generally speaking, but with the caveat that those forces are happening too, or what about that bit?
Yeah. I mean, nothing there does last for a long time. And when it does, when something goes, it does feel like, like you're losing a family member or something.
Yeah.
When you become a part of that family. We're having that right now with a venue called Paragon. Not sure if you played there.
Right. No, I haven't.
So if you're familiar with Bossa Nova Civic Club, it's owned by John Barclay.
Okay.
Same thing. And they just ran into some issues and now that one's shutting. And the same story for a lot of like the mid-sized clubs, which get hurt the most. And as you're saying, happening here in London.
Right.
It's hard for them to survive.
Totally. And, often those are the venues that are kind of key part of the infrastructure of the scene. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked a lot on the show recently about the kind of underlying, the kind of plumbing of dance music, right? Like the infrastructure that, like we talked about, radio and record shops and clubs, and there have been different developments. Some are positive, some are negative. Like the decline record shops, absolutely, I would say is a negative, and the support structures that they have historically provided, and the clubs are sort of similar. What are your general observations on that? Like, I mean, we just did an interview. I'll mention it. I'm not sure what the
rollout's going to be.
Yeah, exactly. So Richard Fearless was in that chair 5 minutes ago, talking very positively actually about the state of the dance scene, generally speaking, with the caveat with the caveats I've just made. Right. Yeah. There's been developments which have not been good. Right. Talk a bit about the whole thing outside of New York, kind of like your experience of it more broadly, like touring and releasing stuff. And
I think what I've noticed is that as ticket prices have gone up and shows have been, not all, but a lot of shows in the larger cities have been kind of more focused on putting together what seems like a mini daytime festival. A lot of the attendees, party goers, clubbers, ravers are focused more on going to these bigger events and not going out as often.
Yep.
So the trickle-down effect can be lighter turnout, venues closing, and just like the unknown of what a night will be. Still had really great nights. I feel like my expectations change a little bit now, where even if I think the night's going to be incredible, I just go in with like, hey, whatever happens, happens.
Okay.
And to be pleasantly surprised, or, you know,
right.
it's a little bit better on my
place to be, right?
on my mental health.
Yeah, right.
But, no, I still think that there's so much more, I feel like with every day that passes, there's so much more interest in the scene and in dance music. And there's a lot of crossover from the commercial mainstream side. You know, there's always that people testing out the underground and wanting to know more about it. And I think now with like the you know, the entry to even DJing and music production being at its, you know, lowest level ever, and every day it gets easier, right? With technology, AI, anything and everything, that people are really into it. And whether that's good or bad, that we, you know, we can discuss that as well, what that means for
yeah, right.
scene and
yeah, there are pros and cons to that whole thing.
Yeah. And, you know, you can say like, oh, it could be like natural selection, that people get weeded out and the right ones cut through, quote unquote right ones. I don't want to get myself in trouble with that.
Yeah, right.
But,
yeah.
But you know what I mean? But it does give everyone a fair shake at least. And I think that does bring something new to the scene. Still, you know, to be said what kind of effect, whether positive or negative, that's going to have.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's true that barriers of entry are basically non-existent now at all.
Yeah, at all.
And I mean, the way I've put it, like on the show before, is that it's great that people are able to make music more easier, because making music is just good for people, right? It's a healthy thing to do with your time, right? Yeah. It's good for your mental health. Like I think it generally is. And yeah, unless you get deep in the weeds with worrying about what you should be making, but that's another story entirely. Just the kind of hobby of doing it, right? Is good.
Called out. No,
yeah. Right. No, mate. Honestly, that's another story. But there is a problem with. And this is a problem not just in the dance scene, but in music more generally. You know, the kind of widely cited statistic of 100,000 tracks being released every day, and like, you know, the degree to which any of them are any good, and, you know, how much innovation is really happening. I mean, you're kind of tempted to make the assumption that if there is that much stuff, then a percentage of it must be good.
And we'll cut through. But if there's so much music and there's not enough eyes and ears on each track and given enough attention, then who knows? Yeah, there's be some lost gems there, I think.
Yeah, totally. And another thing we've talked about is the changing way in which scenes emerge and develop. And you first came to prominence as part of the lo-fi movement, which was a fascinating development for me. For me
as well.
Right. I mean, I remember just like kind of like listening to these tunes and wondering like from a technical perspective, like which plugin was being applied here to get that overdrive, right? that kind of shit. That fascinated me. But it was striking that this was a movement that happened, and there were a bunch of producers that came through together.
Yeah.
And I'm struggling to think off the top of my head now if there's been something similar that has happened since then. I mean, you do get kind of like waves of things happening, but like that was a very defined, contained thing.
Yeah.
And maybe the last of those things, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm struggling to think of an
I was having a conversation with a friend the other night about that as well, and I was trying to pinpoint something, and then I got to the point where maybe I'm just not as in tune with those subgenres, you know, and those movements, but no, it's hard to think of. And that one, you know, that lo-fi movement, I don't know, it felt kind of serendipitous in a way, because it all was like, there were a couple different points of connection there.
You were geographically spread out there, right?
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Like how you and I haven't met until now after, let's say, 5 years of communicating, kind of was the same thing with a lot of these artists as well. And I think that, you know, the one I remember, the one point of kind of meeting, and it was sort of self-promotion in a way. You would just make a post. It was on Facebook, and it was in this closed group that I think you could ask to be a part of, as long as you weren't acting a fool in there. And I think it was being run by, there were a few different figures. It's funny enough talking about figures, but, a lot of the guys who had these YouTube channels that were showcasing the music and making these visuals, that whether it was taken from really obscure films from like the 1960s, like let's say French film, Italian film, and just putting together these clips that sort of encapsulated the emotion of some of these tracks as well. And it was like a beautiful, just a beautiful connection.
I wasn't aware of that. Okay.
Yeah.
So there was
there's a few
symbiosis.
Guys. I think two here, two of the main guys were here in London. Actually maybe one in Manchester, Herford, and then, UK Funky. It's what their labels were and their channels are, I guess still. Another one, Mosculus, I believe he's in the Czech Republic, and then one called, named Ilf, which he was in Lithuania.
Okay.
I'm actually doing an upcoming tour as a part of Ilf. The channel also has now become a record label.
Okay.
And is hosting a few of us to tour through Europe this summer. So,
right.
Which is kind of cool because I've kind of moved a bit away from the scene. I think as a lot of the artists have.
Yeah,
it's just kind of evolved from in many different ways. And I'm sure you have your opinion on.
Well, it acquired a bit of baggage quite quickly.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I thought it was slightly unfairly, but there's definitely, you all seem to be quite keen to get away from it quite quickly.
Yeah, I think once the bad publicity was like running amok, it was kind of like
talk about that. How was the bad publicity manifesting itself?
I mean, I was lucky. I didn't catch any strays there because I think most of my mates were catching flack for their silly names, like the artist name.
Of course.
That's what it started from, I think.
Okay.
I think it started from that, and a lot of people not really just being like, what is this? What is even, yeah. And then with the sound that people are like, you're intentionally making things low fidelity, and like, it wasn't the idea to try to make things, like we're in the year of 2016, we should be trying to make things sound better. Yeah. What is going on here?
Totally. I have to say, I mean, it's an easy kind of knee-jerk reaction, I suppose. Like I say, I found it really interesting, from a sort of technical perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's a kind of, when you've spent your whole career trying to make stuff sound good, and I talked a bit about this on the show before, in the early dubstep scene, everyone was making tunes on Fruity Loops, right? So you had dead silence in the tracks, and a lot of it sounded really clean.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it acquired, and particularly when you were getting given tunes on CD, because people would cut them on dub plates. And once you're cut to dub plate, you get a bit of overdrive and kind of like, so when you heard them out or on the radio, that tends to be how it sounded. But when you swap CDs with someone and you stuck it on, like these records sounded so, I mean, clean is the only way to put it. Right. I mean, like
pristine.
And I was making tunes, with I wasn't in the box at all. I had some dusty old PC, I had an EMU sampler, a couple of outboard effects. So I had cable noise in my tunes, and it killed me. It absolutely killed me because everyone else's tunes had dead silence and I couldn't get dead silence in my tracks. So that's the kind of, that has been my mentality, or at least somewhere at the back of my head.
You were made,
right?
You were made for the scene. You were made for the scene.
So to hear this kind of lo-fi stuff, I remember listening to the kind of early DJ Seinfeld and stuff, and his stuff wasn't, that was, or certainly for the first album anyway, it was sort of lo-fi and hi-fi at the same time, right? I find it really interesting, to be honest.
Yeah, I do too. I think part of the reason that I wound up doing that and found myself in that scene too is probably because I didn't know how to make it. I didn't have the skill or the know-how to make it pristine or clear,
right?
Or the care. No, but it did get to a point where I had been trying to make tunes for a few years at that point, not putting anything out, and I just was, I don't know, I felt like at that time I was separating from what the scene in New York was, which was leaning more towards kind of minimal, really like put your hands up in the air kind of stuff. And I didn't feel connected with a lot of that. And there were smaller pockets going on for sure, but I didn't know where that was. And I think just sitting in my home studio and thinking about what I wanted to make.
What year are you in roughly here?
We're talking like 2014.
Yep. Right, yes, it's the kind of end of minimal, when minimal was not minimal anymore, and it was just kind of like minus records with these big breakdowns and actually not minimal.
Right, and not minimal.
Yeah.
And
Still called minimal.
yeah, and like all of my friends would be at the club, like on K and all that shit, and I was like, it's not really, that wasn't for me at the time. And I remember just being in my home studio, and I had 2 roommates and 2 of my best friends, and I was just like fucking zoning in. And, I maybe didn't even leave my apartment for like a day and a half or 2 days, but it just became this like thought of what I wanted to do, and it very intentional, and not to sound like, oh, wow, like that I was doing something mind blowing, as I wasn't. There was already Lies in New York, happening. That label was already like, I don't know, a couple years going.
Yeah. Yeah, that was lo-fi before lo-fi. So, yeah,
for sure. And but I just wound up making what felt right for me at that moment in time. And I don't know, and again, for me, it was serendipitous that there were a bunch of other people all over the world who were feeling the same way. And thankfully we were able to connect.
Right. And so, when it caught some hype, how did everyone react to that? There must have been a range of reactions, presumably.
I think at the time, I think we were all just kind of giddy and excited. We were all really green.
Surprised that it was happening.
We were green as fuck. Shocked, surprised.
What was the first track that really connected? There must have been a moment at which you all thought, fuck, hang on.
Of mine or of someone else?
Generally speaking, the community I'm talking about.
I think probably the one that like really was maybe one of the first that was a track and not just like the artist with a few tracks was probably DJ Boring's Winona.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I just feel like that connected with the listeners, of the scene with like more than, and Ross and Friends, I think, Talk to Me, You'll Understand. That was the other one. Those two were, I think, like
And at that point, did the scene have fans outside of the people who were participating?
Yeah. Believe it or not, there were like really hardcore fans, and still to this day that are upset that I'm not playing lo-fi at shows and whatnot.
Right.
And fair to them, but as an artist, I love I've always tried to sort of not surprise anyone along the way, that with even though I was making lo-fi, I was always trying out different styles. It wasn't only just like lo-fi house and whatnot. So as my sound has cleaned up a bit, the styles have always been across the spectrum. And that was intentional too, that I didn't want to have like a huge pivot in my career, in my production that would surprise everyone to the point that I would leave everyone behind, or I would be left behind.
Yeah, sure.
And as an artist, I struggled to make the same song in the same genre over and over. I wish I could.
Right.
I'd probably be better along.
People that could do that then tend to do well, to be honest. I struggle as well with it. Like, definitely consistency is rewarded. Solid consistency
for sure. And I look back and I'm like, damn, I wish I would have done that. But at the same time, no, I don't wish I would have done it at all. I'm quite happy with how I'm able to express myself through my music without any sort of barriers or expectations, except maybe hopefully expectation of quality. But
that. Yeah. Sticking with the community for a bit, I mean, I'm interested in this because there's definite parallels between the way you talk about it and the early dubstep thing, which was also very much an online thing. Had a small but pretty committed audience, which then had this moment, and which it suddenly became wider. And then as soon as something acquires that kind of momentum, opinions become divided quite quickly, right? And with dubstep, obviously the North American guys jumping on it just added that extra fuel to the fire.
You're welcome.
Thanks for that. So we just mentioned that how the lo-fi thing broke apart quite quickly. I mean, how much of it was that due to the community coming apart, or was it the kind of individual decisions?
I think it was a bit of the individuals involved. I think that the publicity really affected a lot of the artists. I can't say personally.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think it did have an effect. And I think then as profiles became larger, audiences became larger, I think, I think when things got a bit more serious, let's say, I'm sure that management gets involved.
Right. I mean, both Ross from Friends and DJ Seinfeld both signed to an industry as well, right? So, yeah.
And I think, that can change a lot for sure. It for myself at least, like that you can start to overthink things and could take the purity out of out of the music.
Yeah.
So I think a bit of that, and I think a bit of the listeners not only just being hardcore lo-fi, because the lo-fi did cover different styles and genres too. I think when you're not the shiny new toy anymore, there's always something else to gravitate towards. But I do believe that everyone being a bit spread out all over the world. I know that a couple of the artists were here in London or had moved here from, let's say, like Australia or whatever. But
when you don't have a kind of physical,
when you don't have that physical center, it's hard to do that. And then I think that touring, there was intent to not have it be like lo-fi tours.
Right.
So then I think that quickly sort of just allowed for the scene to sort of fall apart or disperse,
When was it very much over by the time the pandemic hit?
Yeah, I think so. Right. Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So what was your exit out of this? Like, did you have a moment in which you thought like, fuck, we need to pivot out of this?
I've had many thoughts about that, but not in a way where, I don't know. I guess there were a few moments where I'm like, shit, this is just like really cringy. Like, what is being attached to it? But I didn't think my music was. I never thought that music was. It was more just like I don't know. Just felt like it had a lot of negative connotations, right? And for me, I think it was 2019. I put out my one and only album to this point. But I'd been working on that probably for a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
My father passed in August of 2017, and I named the album up after him. And I believe that's around the time I started working on it. And that album, it's kind of lo-fi. It's got a little bit of not lo-fi element to it as well. But from that point, I think that was probably where I was like, fuck it, I'm going to go in my own direction here. I'm going to do an album that touches on so many styles and genres. It's going to have a vocal feature and just kind of, and at that time, I think in the lo-fi scene, that wasn't really happening. I know DJ Seinfeld put out his album, didn't have any features. I think that was just all samples and whatnot. And I just kind of wanted to, I don't know, sort of lay my own path, as things were seemingly going in all different directions. So the sense of a scene and, let's say, support from that scene didn't feel as strong as it had a couple of years prior to that.
Right. Okay. Seinfeld's manager is actually a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
So I kind of had my, I suppose, viewpoint of it in that period was kind of through him.
Yeah.
I definitely had the impression that you guys were all like, okay, we need to escape this to some degree. Tell me about getting into music. Like you mentioned that, making that early stuff was the moment it clicked into place. Is that what you were? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, well, it took me a few years to run through a lot of like really garbage that I was making.
Totally. I think that's a good process to go through. And if you can do it without releasing anything, that's better.
And that's what I did.
Okay.
And I really did that. And then I had an idea of what I wanted to make. But then from, let's say, like 2014, as I mentioned earlier, around that time, that I started doing it until mid 2015, 2016, at that point, I'm older, I'm 30 years old.
Yeah.
So for me, it was kind of like, if this is Michael, this is what you want to do, you really got to go for it.
Right. Yeah.
So
time is short.
Yeah. But I guess I guess I could be an example that it's never too late. But I really
I mean, I was 27 when I was able to quit my day job. Yeah. And I know people, there were lots of people in dubstep scene who were much younger. And I'm glad in hindsight that I had to, work a day job for 6 years, because like it was useful, in life terms.
Totally. So I on a similar note, I was like, well, at that time, I think I was DJing around New York. I was playing 3-4 nights a week to survive, make money, pay my rent, whatever. But at that point, I had a thought. I'm like, how, this is not sustainable. And if I really want to make music, I need to really have time for it. And maybe I need to have more of a regimented schedule for myself. And, I pretty much stopped doing that and took a day job at a retail shop, men's clothing store, just so I had a schedule.
Right. Okay.
That I could,
yeah.
Wake up and have whatever, maybe it was like 10 to 8, 11 to 8 every day. And at first it was only supposed to be part-time, maybe 20 hours a week. And then 2 years later, I'm like working 40 hours a week. I'm a store manager. I'm what did I get myself into?
Right.
But I was really committed to not doing that. And I think that was another thing that helped. I did not want that to continue much longer either.
That's a powerful motivating factor, isn't it? When you really dislike what you do.
It keeps you going. It really keeps you going. Right. You'll do anything to get out of that situation.
Yeah.
So I remember there were moments when we didn't even have like a break room. We had just a large bathroom that kind of was storage as well and whatnot. I remember spending like some of my lunch breaks back there on my laptop, just like knocking out ideas and feeling like I'm, so committed. I was pretty much obsessed.
Yeah.
And it wound up that I think in like the fall of 2016, I had an offer. I think even before I had any offers in New York to play any shows based off of my production, I had an offer to play at, in Paris at, oh my God, what's the name of the club that was, the boat, on the boat?
Concrete.
Concrete. Yeah.
Yeah.
Concrete, to play live.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And, shortly thereafter, I connected with my first agent, Sarah, who was at TSA, which is, Giles agency. Yeah. And then we started working together, and then some shows started happening, but that was my first show abroad.
Concrete was pretty great club.
Oh my God. I was shitting myself.
Okay.
Because the way when you play a live set, have you played a live set?
Yes. It's not like DJing.
Have you played there live?
Oh, right. No, I haven't played there live.
Yeah.
No, but
so
I have played after people playing live though. Yeah.
So when it comes down from the rafters, it's like this whole kind of theatrical thing.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. And I'm playing right after, Huerco S, who I'm a massive fan of, was at the time. And I'm just like, and you could call him, you could essentially say that he was like a pioneer prince of that lo-fi, really raw sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back for him to be like, "You're ready to go."
Probably rather not.
Yeah, all good.
Like a bit longer.
Yeah. And I remember, so my agent Sarah is like in the front, in the crowd, right in the front. Seinfeld's there too, because he had a show the night before somewhere, and that was our first time meeting, and it was a really beautiful moment. But I probably blacked out. I don't even really remember it. Yeah. So that's kind of how things started to take off for me. And I feel like I'm not surprised, but I feel like New York, maybe it's a bit different now, but back then I had already felt like I needed a stamp of approval from abroad.
Right.
To be able to have that, to be able to get booked and play the shows and headline shows in New York.
Let me ask you, you mentioned like DJing a lot before that. What was your DJ set at that time? And talking about DJing, generally speaking, and your kind of route into DJing?
Yeah, it kind of depended on where I was playing. If it was like, more of a, let's say like in New York, there were certain parties that were strictly music. Then there are others that were a bit more like fashion scene with music. Yeah. So it would depend, it could be a mixed bag.
DJ basically. Like,
yeah. It could be a mixed bag. And then if I had gotten to the point where I'm like, I need a little extra cash, it could be open format. And I think that really helped me too. And, being someone who grew up loving so many different styles of music, even though like I grew up really listening to hip hop and R&B, being, you know, in the States close to New York as well.
Because you're from Philadelphia.
Yeah. You know, for me, that also made me think of DJing and made me think of production in a different way than if I was strictly playing, you know, dance records all the time.
Yeah.
And, so that I have, you know, sort of evolved from that. And then I was like, man, I can't do this anymore either. And that's when I started working the job. So doing a lot of things I didn't want to do really motivated me.
yeah.
Quite a bit.
100%. Yeah. Okay. So, let's talk about the album actually.
So my album Ted,
personal kind of thing.
It was really personal. And I believe it took me about 1.5 to 2 years of, different demos and different ideas that I had. I had certain ideas of like who I wanted to be featured on it. And then some things fell through. And then,
did you have a, concept for the record at the outset, or were you trying to realize something that a kind of process that had already begun, or was it
No, I think I didn't really have a concept. It was sort of just trying to release all of the emotions I was feeling from the loss of my father through sound. And I didn't know where I wanted to go. I just knew that I wanted there to be a thread through the record, but I didn't want the record to sound completely the same. And I know there are some of my favorite records do sound quite alike sonically and everything, but that was, I think, the only conscious effort was to not make it sound exactly the same, but have a sort of thread where a lot of these tracks if I recall correctly, I haven't listened to it in a while, have sort of like an intro, outro feel, or like interlude feel. Yeah. Which I think is quite nice, where it's not just a full record, you know, it sort of blends together.
Sure.
As one full listen. It was a really heartfelt record that is, it means a lot to me when people still bring that record up, because now it's been almost 6 years since it came out. And, there was a moment shortly before my father passed that, I was spending time with him at, he and my mom's place, just outside of Philadelphia. And it was around the time, I think he knew he was sick, but didn't want to admit to it, didn't want to go to a doctor, was a bit stubborn.
That dude kind of thing. Right?
Yeah, dude thing. He was a dude. I don't know how to describe him. He wasn't like a macho guy, but he was just a dude.
He's a man.
He was a man. And, but towards the end of his life, he started to open up a bit more to me, and we connected quite a lot. It was great. It was amazing. And, there was one moment where he was sharing, let me say that he was a songwriter, but he was too scared to share it to fail.
Right.
And that was one thing that when I knew that, when I learned that as I was growing up, it really made me make a commitment to myself that I wouldn't do that.
Right.
That no matter what, I would put myself out there as vulnerable as it would feel and be, that I would give it my best shot. Yeah. And that pushed me, whether that was his intention or not. Right. I can thank him for that.
Okay. Yeah.
But back to one of these moments.
What kind of stuff did he write? Was he a guitar player or like?
No, he was just writing like vocal, like lyrics.
Oh, right.
Just writing lyrics. Yeah.
Really?
Just writing lyrics. I grew up listening to what he listened to, which was like 1950s and 60s rock and roll. Yep. You know, early, blues and R&B. And that was his thing. That was what he loved. So during one of these moments, I don't know if I think that was maybe one and only time I smoked marijuana with him.
Okay.
So I think we were high, and I was able to record him singing one of his songs.
Right.
Which was a big step for me to get him to open up, like that to me.
Yeah.
And I recorded it on my phone, and that made it onto the record. Felt like it needed to be there.
Yeah, right.
For me, for his voice to kind of live on something physical.
Sure.
And I don't know. It's a beautiful thing for me to even be able to have the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To give him sort of I don't know, for his legacy to live and his lyrics to actually what he wanted and wish would have lived on a record. Maybe not.
Yeah.
His intention wouldn't be on, an electronic music record.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm really happy that I was able to do that.
Yeah, totally. That's an amazing story. So you're gonna make another album?
I knew you were going to ask that. In my head, I was asking the same thing. Yeah, I am. I don't know when, but talking about it, like reminiscing about that album is...
Yeah, right. I mean, albums are funny things. I mean, I haven't released a Scuba album now for 10 years. And the longer I leave it, the more of a problem that becomes. Right. And I've got something on the go, which is supposed to be an album project. And I keep changing my mind about the direction, and it's gone through quite a number of different iterations now. There's something seductive about the format, I find. And the first few episodes, the first probably 30 episodes of this podcast, I asked basically everyone who had made an album how they felt about the album format and how it's changed and how music consumption has changed and formats and all the rest of it, and attention spans and all that. I think basically everyone always says yes, albums are still important and I want to make an album. Like, how do you feel about that whole thing?
I agree, but I know that, oh man, I've heard the other side of the story a lot too, the other opinion, which is like, and I feel that way about, music consumption and the duration in which people listen to music as well. But you don't make an album for that reason anyway, or like to be discouraged by that. If your intent is to make an album, you make the album for either for yourself or for those who, even if it might be a small percentage of your following and your listeners, you make it for them.
It's funny because, yeah, I totally agree with you. But that wasn't always the case. The album became a thing because basically LP records enabled you to put 45 odd minutes of music together, and it just acquired over time this kind of significance, right? And that's not nothing. That absolutely means something. But it is sort of intangible. And that's kind of why I think it's an interesting question with regards to audience expectations and the way people listen to music now, right? Because it isn't a given that it will survive at all.
Yeah, true.
And, I personally, I don't like that as a concept, because I absolutely agree with you. I mean, the album to me is extremely important, but it's just funny the way these things acquire significance over time and through means which are not always explicitly artistic. Yeah. Because
I think, you're talking about the it fitting on a record, right? On a vinyl, where if you're not talking about the physical, you can make a digital album of like 100 tracks, if we're being honest. Like it doesn't have to end at any point. Maybe your distro will tell you, that's not possible. And like, DSPs.
How many tunes are on that new Skrillex record? It's quite a few, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot.
They're all like a minute long anyway, so you can probably get that on whenever.
Yeah, but the duration, but I don't know. Like I've seen a few EPs that are like EP1, EP2, and it's kind of like a thread between them.
Yeah.
Just kind of a cool concept too. I like that. But if you're just putting out EPs, they don't have to necessarily be similar, and then they wouldn't even work as an album. So I don't know. I think it's a beautiful thing, and I hope it continues to live on. But I do get it with so much music being made and released every single day.
It becomes harder and harder to justify from a commercial perspective.
Oh, for sure.
Basically.
Yeah. I don't even think anything more needs to be said there. Yeah, it's true, because it when it comes down to the financial aspect of it, it's like,
I mean, it's funny because if you go on your Spotify, You've had unbelievable success with the slowed down and sped up versions.
Yeah.
Right? Which is, I mean, it doesn't get any more commercial than that, really, does it? But this is absolutely fun.
Oh,
That's
no.
not a criticism at all.
That went through my head before that, before I made that conscious decision.
Right.
I was talking with my mate one of my best friends, and he is the A&R at my distro. And he was like, the original track had already begun to go viral. He was like, you know, if you want to make it easier on yourself, if you do want to, you know, if you don't want to leave money on the table, you should do this. And I was like, really?
I've tried to persuade people on Hot Rush to do that, and people are just like, oh God, no. Really?
Well, I was like,
yeah.
Really? And then he's like, no, he's like, you're really stupid if you don't do that.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. It's like, this is just like, it's free money.
Coming from someone I consider to be
right.
my best friend, I'm like, all right, I guess I gotta do it. And it worked out.
Yeah, man.
Can't really, can't say that it didn't.
Absolutely.
It was a bit like, because I'm not on TikTok, I'm not.
I was going to say, because that is, I mean, it's obviously migrated to Spotify, but that must be driven by TikTok, right?
It was. Like, I have an account. I should be, my management was posting on there for me because I just couldn't, I don't know. Didn't have the wherewithal to.
I mean, I don't like it as a platform, really. It just feels, it's very, I don't know. It just feels a little bit off to me. The whole thing just feels a little bit.
Feels a bit off to me too, but maybe we're just two old guys.
Probably.
I think that might be what it is.
Yeah. Totally. So tell me about getting into music in the first place. I mean, tell me about the early years, because what I'm homing in on is you going to school for finance, really. But let's keep it in.
Yeah, you want to get there, don't you? Music wise. So as I was saying, my dad, like, I grew up with, a lot of 50s and 60s rock and roll being played in the house. And I grew up.
Did you play any instruments ever?
I did. I played the violin for like 2 years. I wouldn't call that playing an instrument.
Okay.
I think the best thing I got out of that is like a really hilarious photo of me with the violin, like these big glasses and in like a
trying to get
suit, it's ridiculous.
Trying to get a child to play violin in his first instrument, it's a bit unfair, man. I
think I chose it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I chose it. My parents didn't force me to do anything. No.
It's the last thing you want your child doing as well in the house. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it was bad. It was bad. And I have these vivid memories of like how much I had to have like a chin pad.
Okay.
And I had to have like a really small violin. I was like a pretty small kid until like 16 or 17.
Okay,
actually,
right.
like sprouted up really quickly. But so everything was like miniature, like the violin was little, like everything was little. So that lasted like 2 years. And I was like, oh, it's not really for me. And then from that point, from then until really getting into like music production, I didn't play any instruments. I think I'm better, and still to this day, I'm better at picking out music, like finding my way around like a keyboard and a piano.
Yep.
Than I am being technical. And I know it may sound stupid, but when I was trying to get more technical and learn all the different chords and everything, I thought to myself too, the way I work, I'm like, if I know too much, it might take away a bit of the, the creativity of the unexpected happenings. Sure. So maybe that's
a common like viewpoint.
Yeah. And it's probably a common viewpoint from those who are not technically sound. But it's fair. It's like our little excuse. We have a little group chat where we like, hey, what should we use today to make us feel better? So yes, from that point on, I think my first like commercial foray into music was I was probably in high school, and I was like burning CDs. I was downloading albums off of like Kazaa or whatever,
CDs, wow.
And I would burn CDs, and I would come into school, and I would be like, I would let my classmates know that if they wanted to buy
the Prodigy,
like a new album, yeah. And that was great. That was really, that was probably my first foray into the commercial side of it, and then probably not, I didn't really think too much about it as a career or anything. I mean, I just loved music. I was obsessed with music in every single way, but I never thought that I could have a career from it.
So what was the first music, independently of, listening to stuff that your dad was playing? What was the first thing you got into?
I don't know. My first cassette tape was this, was a hip hop cassette tape. I can remember what it looked like because I have an older brother. He's 5 years older than me. So a lot of my influence also came down from him. Yeah,
that's handy when you're.
So whatever, I didn't really have a choice. You know, it was whatever he was into or whatever was happening at that time was kind of passed down to me. And had this one cassette tape that was the group Camp Low. Okay. And it was Lucchini. I believe it was an orange cassette tape, orange like artwork, cover, white cassette tape, and I ran that to death pretty quickly. And then when the Sony like Discman came out, I had to, got one of those for Christmas or something. And that became my thing too. Then combined with the internet, being able to burn CDs,
Right. The entrepreneurial spirit.
I was already an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Right.
I was already running my own, physical distro, if you want to, in high school,
right,
middle school. But, that was kind of the first, the beginnings there until I left for New York. And when I arrived in New York, I started getting into, the clubbing scene and stuff. And it was like clubbing scene from all across the spectrum.
So 2004, you mentioned off camera that you arrived in New York, right? So
2004.
So you went to Dub War, I believe. We've had Dave Q on the show before.
Yeah.
Joe Nice has also been on the show. I talked to Joe Nice for 3.5 hours actually on the longest episode that we've done of this.
Oh my God.
Yeah, right. Did a full hour on American racial politics at the end. It was probably not necessary for a music podcast, but we did it anyway. Tell me what was, because there was a lot going on in New York actually then at that point.
Yeah, again, my memory is a bit hazy with it, but I was going to so many different venues almost if not every night, like every other night. Yeah. I was 20 years old, and the scene in Philadelphia where, I grew up on just outside of Philadelphia, and then went to school there for 2 years, but I had like a girlfriend at the time who wasn't really into what I was into, and I wasn't seeking too much out when I was in Philadelphia. But when I got to New York, it was like, okay, it was just like a playground.
Yeah.
And being 20, with sort of easy access to everything, I was out quite a bit. And
were you into a specific scene, or were you just like taking it all in?
No, that's the thing. I was taking everything in.
Yeah.
Taking everything in. And then, I told you off camera as well, I worked in finance. So I was going to school for finance.
Yeah, right.
Which is a pretty competitive program.
Yeah, okay.
Pretty competitive. I was going to school with...
to NYU?
Yeah, I went to NYU.
Yeah.
So I went to the Stern School of Business, which at the time was like maybe top 5 ranked business school in the country, maybe the world. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the real shit.
That was the real shit. And
that's like you're going to work on Wall Street afterwards, right?
I'll get there.
That's what you're going to do.
Well, that was the thing. I never had like clear intentions that I wanted to do that. When I first went to university in Philadelphia, I went for graphic design.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But you don't really start taking graphic design courses until like a semester or two later. So first semester is kind of like really hardcore general design.
Okay.
And I had a professor there. He was crazy. He was so crazy that he would, you would come in with like these abstract art projects, and he would put them up on the wall with a pin, and he would tell you what was good about one little corner of it. And he would literally rip your whole piece of, project up, your piece of work up that you spent maybe like 2 or 3 literal days working on or trying to conceptualize.
Yeah.
He would just rip it up, throw it out of the window apart, and he would go, "This is all that works. This is all the only part that actually works here that you did well."
Okay.
So after a semester of that, I just kind of reconsidered what I wanted to do. I mean, I still love art. I love visual art.
So this was not an effective form of tuition.
It didn't work for me. No, it didn't. It didn't really connect. Okay. Maybe how he wanted to.
Right.
But it did send me down the path that I wound up where I am now, and I can't really complain. But once that happened, and I decided that I wanted to switch majors, I was always good at math, always like numbers. I was like, well, shit, maybe I can just do something in business. I don't even know what yet, but at least I can do something where the grade, like if I take a test, it's right or it's wrong. It's black and white.
Got it. Okay. Certainty.
So
yeah, predictability.
Certainty. When my 18-year-old, 19-year-old self wanted that. Whereas now look at me. I'm in the world of uncertainty, and there's nothing certain here.
Sure.
But
I can understand that as a reaction,
at the time,
right?
That was my reaction. It was kind of to go 180. And I did. And then, I was going to this university, called Drexel University in Philadelphia. And for me, it was kind of, I made this conscious decision that if I was going to study business, that I wanted to be at the best or whatever could be the best school for me to get a better education and have a better future. So I worked my ass off for the next, year and a half to get perfect grades. Actually, the rest of that year, I tried to transfer after that first year to a different school.
Right.
Didn't get accepted anywhere. Did it again for another year. Lo and behold, to my surprise, I got accepted to NYU.
Yeah.
I think they only accept maybe a couple hundred transfer students across all schools each year.
Wow. So,
and even less after your sophomore year.
Right.
Okay. So normally after your freshman year, they give.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just makes more sense that way. So I got accepted there, but then when I got to New York, got to experience New York as a 20-year-old.
Right.
Saw who I was going to school with,
okay,
which were these kids who are the sons of like the CEO bankers already.
Yeah, right.
They're showing up, sitting in the front, the front row of the class, already in a suit because they have an internship they have to run off to with their briefcase.
The future masters of the universe, right?
Exactly that.
Yeah. Okay.
I was like, oh fuck, man, I'm not gonna, these finance classes were graded on a curve, which is like, 2 people, 2 out of 20, let's say 20 students in the class, 2 get an A, 2 get an A minus, then a greater amount get like in the B range.
So it's pure, it's not an absolute grade, it's
no, not at all.
Comparative.
So,
yeah.
So being like okay at math versus these guys, anyway, I did my math and I was like, well,
okay.
I'm not,
right.
I'm definitely not getting the A or the A plus, A minus, whatever.
Yep.
I'm like, I can find my way. I'll be in the range and I'll do okay.
Can hold your own, yeah.
So that kind of led me to partying a bit.
Okay.
And,
fair enough. That's a good place to be if you want to party. So.
Yeah. Not bad. Not bad. It was an era though that was a little bit like the beginning of, like reality TV meets socialites meets that, which was kind of all right too, because there were parties that melded together so many different people from different like backgrounds, and they were all there listening to maybe stuff that you wouldn't think they would listen to. You'd have like, I don't know, punk rockers there at the club listening to like dance music or whatever. And I thought that was really unique at that time.
Yeah.
And, but there was a lot of shit there too. There was a lot of garbage all in between.
Yeah, it's an interesting time for New York, actually. I mean, I was just reminded as you were saying that. I talked to Levon Vincent on the show a while ago now, ages ago, but he was talking about like the kind of Giuliani era attempt to like basically shut down nightlife, post 9/11. I think it was rules that came in. So the clubbing landscape in the city changed quite substantially. And this is, as mentioned, a few years after this. In fact, no, the first time I went to New York to play was 2005, actually.
Okay.
So yeah, so similar sort of time. Yeah, exactly. It did feel like it was cool, but maybe that was just me going to New York for the first time as you were, and like, just being kind of seduced by it. It's a very seductive place, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think I thought probably at that time too, I thought everything was cool. I was like, oh my God, it's so cool. But I have heard that the late 90s were a great time to be there for clubbing too, for everything. But yeah, so I was going out a lot, finding my way. And then I did start, my first job, I was applying. So I remember applying for all these jobs through the school, the NYU portal. So you're applying the same jobs that, again, all the other kids.
I mean, just getting through the course is a good position to be in the job market, right?
I was happy that I, graduated.
Yeah.
It's great. It was fine. But then you're applying for these jobs, right? That everyone's applying to. And there are these, like minimum, grade point average that you graduated with, all these prerequisites. And even with that, I was like, all right, well, I'm not sure. I didn't really have much luck. I had a few interviews, which was, they were okay. Again, for me, this wasn't like do or die. I wasn't like, I really want to work on Wall Street. And if it doesn't work out, what am I going to do with myself, Yeah. And, so in the meantime, I wound up applying for this job, which was sort of like an assistant accounting work for a venture capital company that happened to be based in in Rockefeller Plaza, if you're familiar with that. I think, it's just a very, legendary New York City building that, shows up in a lot of film, TV and everything. And if you go visit too, it's just a destination. So I worked there on the 56th floor because the company I worked for was basically the venture capital arm of the Rockefeller family.
Okay. Wow.
So it was started back in, I don't know, the 50s or 60s, like officially.
Yeah.
It was one of the early investors in Apple and a lot of other like tech companies. They were ahead of the game. Even then, I was showing up to work like reeking of alcohol, pretty hungover, because my job at that point didn't really, it didn't require me to do very much. Okay. So my good times continued through my first job until I interviewed and got this job working for a hedge fund, a London-based hedge fund at that.
Okay.
On Wall Street.
Okay.
And
what year is this?
2000. I'm going to say it's 2007. Late 2007.
So there's a rather large cloud on the horizon of that particular industry. And I was,
right? So I worked right up until I was fired on October 7th, 2008.
Wow. Okay.
Right before.
Okay. But
as things were falling apart, as things were blowing up and falling apart. So at first I was just like a sort of like, not quite an intern, but like, entry level, on the desk. I had my own desk, 6 computer screens, 2 keyboards, phone to, any calls coming in, talking to brokers, whatnot. And then
maybe all 3 phones at once, right? Yeah.
Okay. I got to that point too. Okay. So then I became a junior trader where I had my own book and I was trading, I think at that point I was trading crude oil. I was trading like commodities. So I was trading crude oil, and the volatility of the crude oil market at that point, I think it reached the all-time high around that of like 130 or something, 130 US dollars a barrel. I don't know what it'd be in pounds, but, and I would work in tandem with my boss, my superior, who was down on the New York Mercantile Exchange. And I had to be on a headset with him all day from, 8:30 in the morning until 2:15, something like that. I forget the hours exactly.
Right.
Could barely go take a pee, go to the bathroom.
Yeah, right.
To pee.
Right.
And it was pretty intense.
So tell me in broad terms what the atmosphere was like working on Wall Street that year. I say before, because like when you start in late 2007, I think it was clear that there was trouble ahead at that point. Or to what extent were people acting like that? Was it sort of perceived?
Well, what's wild is the company, I won't name them, just for, I don't know. They, we traded, derivatives. We were a derivatives focused hedge fund, whether it means anything to you or not.
Absolutely does mean a lot to me.
So options, derivatives, right? So we wanted volatility in the markets.
Okay. Cause that's what you can.
That's where you can make your money and hedge and everything and make
the bigger swings, the better, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So we looked at everything in terms of standard deviation moves, and we wanted movement. So when it was boring, and there was a chill day, it wasn't great for anyone, I guess.
Yeah. No one's making money.
No one's making money. We're kind of bleeding a little bit of money. We're just, time's going on. So when it got chaotic, it should have been great for us, except for the fact that along the way, when it was a little chaotic in the oil market, we were making a lot of money. our book we were doing great. The strategy was great. And then at some point, and I don't know why, but we reversed our position.
Okay.
Under the pretense that, hey, we've never seen anything like this before. Let's lock in, our profits, and it can't keep going like this. But when you've never seen anything like that before, it's a crazy take to say, this can't happen.
Right.
And guess what? It did. Not only did we lose everything that we had made, then we were down. And I'm talking like millions.
Yeah.
That I'm seeing in front of my face every day. And next to me is the VP of the company, who he wasn't very, he wasn't really knowledgeable about what was going on. He was good at networking and bringing on people to the team who had the knowledge, who were really great, who were, had their own, computer program that would trade in high volume and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He knew how to find those really, really, really brilliant people and bring them on board. Myself included. No, he didn't hire me. He wanted to fire me, and he was definitely part of the reason why I got fired. So essentially what happened was, leading my firing, which would have maybe happened anyway. I don't know. Sure. Shit was crazy. But, we were trading. There are two types of contracts that we can initiate, for crude oil. And my boss would initiate them with the broker, on the floor. Then at the end of the day, they would call me and just to double check, like, okay. So there's two types. One is, physically settled. One is cash settled. We would only trade physically settled, but we would never.
Physically settled, you mean
you would actually have to, you would actually have to accept the oil, like barrels of oil.
Yeah.
But the valuation of each contract, those two contracts, is way different. So in our system, it would be different if I'm inputting a cash settled one versus physical.
Right.
So we never trade cash, ever.
Right.
But I don't double check. So at the end of the day, it's normal, cool. At the end of the month, when our options are expiring, I can't seem to get everything to
agree.
To agree and to like equal out where we're not long future, crude oil futures, where we're going to have to accept the oil.
Right.
I'm like, fuck. So I call in my boss and I'm like, hey man, what the fuck's going on? We're there late. We're there. He's normally out at like the moment 2:30, comes by at 2:30, and then he's like, all right, go in the box or whatever. I'm like, all right. We're there till like 9 or 10 p.m. trying to figure it out.
Right.
He's like, it's cool. When you come in the morning, here's what you're going to do. Because we were long 400 futures, which is a lot. You can move the market that way. And before trading, pre-market, he's like, just, unload that. But do it, quietly. Actually, he tells me that the night before. He's like, that's what you're going to do. I come in, the market moved a standard and a half deviation against us. So I already come in and we're down
even more,
1.2 million on our book, just like from having done nothing.
Right.
And he's like, just offload these. And I'm like, all right, comes out of a meeting, goes into the meeting, and he comes out. He's like, the market moved like already like over 1%. He's like, was that you? I'm like, and I'm like, no way in hell should I, as a 23-year-old, have this much power to be moving the crude oil market.
Right.
And later that day, I was gone by the end of the day.
Really?
Just because of that
Wow.
So the VP next to me was like, that can't happen. They needed to prove a point, even though I don't feel fully responsible. Yeah, I should have double, triple checked.
Okay.
And then my boss felt bad too. So after I was let go, he set me up with like a couple interviews, one with a company called Chicago Trading, which at that time was the top private trading company in the country. So I was like, okay, that sounds kind of cool. We were given a book when I started at this hedge fund, a book on trading that was written by the guy working there who was like a senior trader. So I was like, oh, well, if I want to continue doing this, that sounds good. Okay. I don't necessarily want to move to Chicago, but I could maybe do it. And then I had I think 1 or 2 phone interviews, and they were going to fly me out to Chicago for 2 rounds of interviews, like really intensive stuff. And I called back maybe a couple weeks it was probably 2 or 3 weeks after I was fired, 2 weeks. And that's when the market had just fucking broken.
Yeah. What day was the kind of,
I think it was October
weekend,
maybe October 28th or 9th. I feel like it was
it makes sense.
The end of October.
Yeah. Okay.
And they're like, hey, Michael, we just, we were really interested in bringing you on. We just can't hire anyone at this point.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, the question I asked about the kind of wider sort of atmosphere amongst in the industry, as it were, like, obviously there was that point where everything got real, right? And there was, and there must have been like, just, panic. But what, like, to what extent did you feel it, I suppose, beginning to happen? Like, I mean, to what extent were people getting worried about it? Like, this has nothing to do with music, but I'm just interested in this stuff. So
yeah, no, I am too. So in our office, again, like I told you, volatility was pretty good unless it was like we reversed our position to the point of expecting less volatility.
But there must have been the understanding that despite the fact that it was good for you, it wasn't great for quite a lot of other people, not least the kind of real economy.
But that's how dark the industry can be. And that was another, one way that I found out quickly that it wasn't for me, which is, benefiting off of other people's misery and the small, the little people, which I witnessed. I was witnessing market manipulation while I was trading.
Right.
I saw that in real time. And this is back in 2007. And I'm like, this is not legal.
What kind of thing?
There would be, at the very end of the day, there would be a certain run up that whoever had the means to do so would do it and then have it fall back down. So they would be making money on the, the run up and sell.
Okay. So up and dump kind of thing like that.
It was definitely being manipulated, but by whom? You wouldn't be able to see who it was exactly, but,
right.
But there was manipulation. So in the crude oil market, the closing price of the day is based off of the final 2 minutes of trading.
Right.
So there's a lot of fighting there and a lot of manipulation of where you want that.
That's a pretty serious incentive, some skullduggery to be going on.
Yeah,
2 minutes.
for sure.
Yeah.
So I would see it with my own eyes and I was like, this is crazy. And then you would just see these people like, the little guy just getting run over and there was no stopping it.
So the sort of caricature of the, completely, unscrupulous, expensive suited wearing, the kind of Gordon Gekko caricature in your experience was to some degree accurate.
A bit. Our attire was not as like elevated because we roll our sleeves up, that kind of, or they, when I say we, I really mean they. Right. I was an outcast in the office. Okay. They already knew, I think they could sense it, but I was good. I was good at what I did. Okay. They could rely on me. They could trust me except for this one little mistake, but it worked out for me. From that experience, I feel like I can do anything. There was so much pressure. There was a lot of stress and pressure.
So that side of it as well is also a bit of a caricature. That's also an accurate portrayal.
Yeah, I think so. The intensity of, you guys, the British, oh my God, I've never been called a wanker or any, really? Some things I had never even heard of at that point. Okay. From a British man being so red in the face and I'm just getting ripped into. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? What am I doing? But it was invaluable, really invaluable.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Experience,
yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Yeah. I got interested in this stuff through reading the Michael Lewis books, actually.
Yeah.
Liar's Poker and Big Short, and also the Flash Boys one actually is interesting about, high frequency trading.
Yeah.
And I know a few people who, good. Actually, the guy who I started Hot Flush with originally, his brother, was at Merrill's in the 90s and then, was running a fund of funds through that period in London. And they're I find them really interesting characters, right? Like, cause they're, cause there is this weird amoral thing that happens, but so many of them are so clever. So actually quite interesting when you get to talk to them one-on-one, right? Mm-hmm. But it's this, very.
But they're characters for sure. I always wonder their intention, like why they got into the industry. What is pushing them? Whether it is just money and strictly greed or if, they enjoy it too. Cause there are sick freaks out there who just enjoy it too, which I think is awesome because I I got into it just because I love numbers, and I'm a avid sports fan too, and I could just sit and look at statistics and numbers, and that tells a story for me too.
Okay.
But there is one character, I forgot to mention this. I had an internship, I think between my junior and senior year, I guess, at NYU. And I'm working for, have you ever seen the film Boiler Room? Like I think it's Vin Diesel, I believe. So it's a film about these brokers who are just like cold calling.
Right.
And I worked this internship doing that. And it was crazy.
Oh, they're doing a bit of that in the Wolf of Wall Street thing.
Okay. Yeah. So it's that guy. You should watch that film. It's a good one.
Okay.
To it. But it's like,
yeah, that's some serious immoral shit going on there.
and I would have like a pitch and for like a stock, and I knew nothing about it. I'm like, what are we doing here?
Penny stocks, right? Yeah.
Pretty much. And this guy was such a sleazy guy, drove a Ferrari, like,
yeah, massive.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, I wish I remember his name, but that was a good one too. But yeah, I'm just really grateful for the experience, and it like gave me a little bit of fulfillment, and then also made me realize that I don't want to really be in anything strictly for the money. Right.
Yeah.
And I never want to lose focus. You can't, I don't know. Outside of finance, I don't think that if you're doing something strictly for the money, maybe you can make it work, but I don't know. I would never be fulfilled.
Sure. So before we go, give me your take on the current state of the markets, because obviously they've been...
Current state of the markets?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I mean, shit is going down, man. Wow.
I wouldn't... I would not say that what my former superiors said, that we've never seen this before, can't get much worse, or can't go there, because I don't really know. I mean,
the difference this time seems to be that they're doing it on purpose, at least to some extent.
It feels very intentional, and it feels like those who should know will know when the intention is when they're done.
I mean, that message that he put out on shows
the other day,
was just blatant.
Yeah. It was like, 15 minutes before the market's open.
Yeah.
Like, now's a good time to buy, and then his like own like coin or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the meme coin is a whole other story.
No, but the intent, it was almost like he could escape liability by putting that ticker up after it.
Right.
Because then he could say, no, I said it's a good time to buy that.
Ah, okay.
But it was almost like a wink, the way I see it, right?
It makes it even worse. Even more.
You know what I mean, though, right? Where he's like, no, it's a good time to buy.
Sure.
And it would be like, ...
Yeah.
But
yeah.
We know what you mean, man.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Plausible deniability. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah. I don't know. I think, it doesn't look good especially for the US. And then the ripple effect, I always worry about that too.
Sure.
Ripple effect across the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
The impact, but
I mean, it's an impossible question to ask, I realize, but
No, because we could talk about it we could have a different podcast called, I don't know, like...
Yeah, all right. Finance, not diving.
Yeah, finance not music.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool, man. Well, listen, this has been fun. Thanks for coming. It's been
a lot of fun. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Music, not diving, with Scuba.